Today, after more than 70 years of atheistic enslavement, the Russian Orthodox Church, by the prayers of new Martyrs and Confessors, is now restoring and reconstructing churches and monasteries stone by stone. But also, there is even more painstaking and crucial work, gathering souls of people. The time of external peace for our Church has come, but internal struggle is becoming even stronger, and the unexampled testimony experience of new Martyrs and Confessors of Russia about the Verity can help living people to identify where and how to go in order not to repeat the mistakes of the past. That is why it is so important to work in archives with personal cards of the repressed people, to analyze the gathered historical material, and to write hagiographies. The feet of the saints of the 20th century for us is the knowledge to have, and it is needed to be actualized for our modern life. If we want to overcome the consequences of the times of trouble we have been feeling until this very moment, despite they were 100 years ago. Unfortunately, the remembrance of new Martyrs and Confessors of the Russian Church has not become in common use, and many people have not fully understood how much in their Christian life they owe to those who gave their lives for the Church of Christ. In most cases, this happens because a modern Christian does not understand and sometimes even does not know what exactly happened throughout the last century and especially at the beginning of the 20th century.
If we try to look at the pre-revolutionary period, we will understand that the events of February and October of 1917 were not accidental, as too many people had been waiting for the changes.
Anyway, the following history showed all that had been kept by the people: evil, hate, envy, apostasy, and betrayal. Nevertheless, appeared lots of people with pure soul and strong faith, whose hearts were full of the love of God, for whom Jesus Christ was not just a historical character.
We must admit that Russian Church before 1917 could be named the Church of the Vulnerable One, but now it has been approved with the blood of new Martyrs and Confessors of the Orthodox Faith.
Since the 1980s, people have rethought the feet of new Martyrs and Confessors, firstly by the efforts of Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, and later by the Russian Orthodox Church itself. By this very moment, more than 2,000 saints have been canonized, and still there are dozens or even thousands of them remain unknown in the heaven-present God and praying for us and our motherland.
The feat of new martyrs is crucial not only due to the fact that they were executed by the apostates who demanded denial of Christ. The new martyrs and confessors are the voice of the time that should be heard nowadays.
After all, exactly the lack of historical knowledge leads to the fact that from the witnesses of the truth, martyrs become ordinary sufferers for their political use. At once we should admit that the Soviets tried to show that there were no any persecutions of the faithful, but there were only measures to fight with the opponents of the political regime. Was the Church the hotbed of the opposition indeed, or it's just evil slander which the Soviets tried to cover public persecutions of the Orthodox Church?
In order to answer this question, we need the knowledge of history. For example, in the heat of the Civil War, in the autumn of 1919, when it was unclear who would win, the White Army or the Red one, Patriarch Tikhon asked the clergy to obey the decrees of the Soviets, as they did not contradict the Christian faith. Beginning from 1923, the archpriests openly spoke about their loyalty to the Soviets. However, this fact didn't make the attitude of the authorities towards the priesthood and the faithful better. Each year, the number of arrests only increased. For example, in 1930, the number of the arrested faithful was 30 times bigger than in 1926. All said above indicates that the Russian Bolsheviks were against the Church itself. They didn't need the loyal Church, but only the destroyed one was needed by the leaders of post-revolutionary Russia. In contrast to the martyrs of the ancient Church, the new martyrs of Russia didn't bear testimony about their faith in Christ openly. They were executed quietly and secretly, but the firmness they kept the likeness of God in themselves in many ways helped to save Russian people from the final enslavement by the soulless Soviet state machine. Almost every faithful, especially if he was a priest, faced a choice: life in humiliation and fear for account of their closest people given to the executors instead of them, or death for the faith in Christ, having a strong spirit. Dozens and even hundreds of thousands people who chose faith in God and death for the verity of God are not just the seed of the Church, but the seed of future Russia, free from the fear of external, soulless evil power. By their own example, new martyrs showed a really high calling of a human to be free from any slavery. Just by the fact of their existence, they proved that good could not be done in a violent way, while the freedom of a human has nothing in common with craven servility to the fearful power of vice, cowardice, and cancellation with evil. The true disciples of Christ died quietly, having firm confidence that death is not horrible, as it is more terrible to live without any human likeness. While many people during the revolutionary terror lost their heads, new martyrs meekly and rationally tried to save Russia and not to let it perish in the depth of the sin. Exactly this sensibility led the archpriests and the faithful of the Russian Church save the precious pearls of the great Russian culture and the seeds of Russian holiness.
What are you thinking about looking at the icons of the saints? You hardly realize that the people we see may be very close to us by time. In fact, most of the new martyrs and confessors of the Russian Orthodox Church live right in the same century as we do. Today, we want to tell you about the people who suffered for the faith and met the Maker during the hard 30s of the 20th century. During our excursion, we will visit 14 churches where 21 new martyrs of the land of Odintsovo served. All of them suffered during the time of severe persecutions, and the hagiography of each of them is the example of the true spiritual feet performed for the name of God as a testimony of Verity. We are at the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in Romashkovo village, where several holy martyrs served: Nikolai Gavarin, Valentin Lukyanov, and Yelysey Stolda. Also, here Holy Martyr Nikolai Dobronravov spent his early years.
Holy Martyr Nikolai was born on the 21st of November in 1861 in the village of Ignatovka in Dmitrovsky County in Moscow province, in the family of priest Pavel Dobronravov, who became a prior at the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Romashkovo, where Nikolai spent his childhood and youth. The sister of Nikolai Pavlovich, Olympiada, married Alexander Mikhailovich Vorontsov, who was ordained a priest at the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in 1889, becoming its prior up to its closure in 1941. In 1881, Nikolai Pavlovich graduated from Moscow Spiritual Seminary, and in 1885 graduated from Moscow Ecclesiastical Academy with a degree of candidate of theology, and began to teach theology and Holy Writ in Bethany Spiritual Seminary. After his marriage, he was ordained a priest, and in 1886 became a Bachelor of Theology, writing lots of articles and books on theological and ecclesiastical issues. Since 1890, Father Nikolai taught the law of God in Alexander Military Academy in Moscow. Since 1892, Father Nikolai served at the Church of Holy Martyr Alexandra of Rome at Alexander Military Academy and taught the law of God in different Moscow gymnasiums. In 1917, he served at the Church of Holy Martyr Nicetas in Staroy Tolmachi in Kuznetskaya Street. In 1917-1918, the priest was a member of local council of the Orthodox Church of Russia. After the revolution of 1917 and the closure of Alexander Military Academy, Father Nikolai was transferred to the Church of All Saints on Kulishki. In summer 1918, the authorities decided to arrest the priest. On the 19th of August, he was arrested and imprisoned in Lubyanka prison in Moscow. On the 3rd of December 1918, the Presidium of Extraordinary Commission sentenced Father Nikolai to the imprisonment in a labor camp. But the case was reviewed, and finally, on the 16th of April, it was decided that due to the lack of vivid evidence against the priest, he was given freedom. At the beginning of 1921, Archpriest Nikolai became a prior to the Cathedral of the Mission in Krutitskaya. By that time, he widowed and took monastic vows, being ordained a bishop of Zvenigorod, the vicar of Moscow diocese. In 1922, many archpriests who did not support the dissenters, the revolutionaries, were arrested. Among others, Bishop Nikolai was also arrested. The authorities sentenced him to 1 year of exile to the Zырян Krai. Upon his return to Moscow, Bishop Nikolai was ordained an archbishop. The church hierarch became one of fellow campaigners of Patriarch Tikhon, helping him in defending the church from the attacks of the revolutionaries. On the 16th of April 1924, the authorities arrested the archbishop and imprisoned him in Butyrskaya prison in Moscow. He was falsely accused of severe beating of workers and peasants inspectorate member, as well as of using his authority in counter-revolutionary agitation among clergy. Being questioned, Archbishop said that he was in charge of Zvenigorod diocese as well as the church in the Moskvoretsky district in Moscow, that included 3 rural deans districts with 44 churches. I have never held any special meeting with rural deans. There have not been held any anti-Soviet speeches of mine, as while communicating with rural deans, I have always stuck to the church sphere only. As for my preachers, they have concerned on the moral sides of life. On the 14th of June 1924, the Archbishop was given freedom. The same year he was appointed an Archbishop of Vladimir and Suzdal. After the death of Patriarch Tikhon, Father Nikolai became one of the assistants of the patriarchal locum tenens Peter Polansky. On the 11th of November 1925, the authorities decided to accelerate the process of splitting in the church. So, for that purpose, they needed to arrest those archbishops who were against anti-church policy of the state. On the 11th, 20th and 30th of November in 1925, 11 closest fellow campaigners of Metropolitan Peter, as well as Archbishop Nikolai and a lot of priests and laymen were arrested. In prison, the investigator in vain tried to persuade the Archbishop to give false testifies against guiltless people. On the 21st of May in 1926, during the special meeting of OGPU, Archbishop Nikolai was sentenced to 3 years of exile in Siberia. When the period of exile ended, he was allowed to live everywhere except 6 big cities with a constant place of living for 3 years. When the period of deprival of civil rights ended, Archbishop Nikolai settled in Moscow. During the persecutions in 1937, the authorities made the extermination of clergymen their top priority. On the 27th of November, Father Nikolai was arrested and imprisoned in Butyrskaya prison. On the questioning, he was accused of taking part in counter-revolutionary organization of the clergymen. On the 7th of December in 1937, the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Nikolai to firing squad. Archbishop Nikolai Dobronravov was executed on the 10th of December in 1937 and was entombed in the unknown Popa's grave on the Butova Range area near Moscow. In August 2000, during the Anniversary Bishops' Council, Archbishop Nikolai Dobronravov was canonized as new martyr and confessor of Russia.
Monastic martyr Valentin was born on the 2nd of August in 1875 in the town of Norofominsk of Moscow province, in the family of peasant Jacob Lukyanov, and was baptized as Vasily. He got an education in a parish school. He married, and the couple had 3 children, but Vasily widowed after the birth of the last child. He joined the Trinity Sergius Lavra in 1906, and on the 26th of May in 1908 was accepted as an obedient. Due to his wonderful musical and singing talents, he was introduced to a choir. On the 7th of November in 1915, Vasily became a monk and was named Valentin. The lavra was closed in 1920. A part of brethren stayed there and became watchmen. Others began to serve at the churches of Sergiev Posad. Monk Valentin began to serve as a psalm reader at Patnitskaya church in Sergiev Posad, where Archimandrite Vassian Patnitsky was an abbot. In the March of 1920, the rector and the parish council of the Patnitskaya church petitioned Patriarch Tikhon about the admission of the monk Valentin to the position of psalm reader to the Patnitskaya church and his ordination as a deacon. At the cross church of the Trinity Monastery, on the 20th of September 1920, Patriarch Tikhon ordained monk Valentin to become a deacon to the Patnitskaya church, where he served until its closure. Shortly after the arrest of Bishop Vassian Patnitsky in the end of 1921, monk deacon Valentin moved to Trinity Hagiography of Zosimis female hermitage in the Zvenigorod County of Moscow province and served in his native Narofamensk district almost for the next 10 years. On the 26th of November in 1923, at the Church of Chrysanthemum Monastery, Patriarch Tikhon ordained monk deacon Valentin, a hieromonk, to the Church of the Presentation of Blessed Virgin Mary in the village of Kotova in Narofamensk district. At the same period, for some time, Father Valentin also served at the Cathedral of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the town of Narofamensk, while in 1930, after the closure of the cathedral, he moved to the town of Kuntsovo, where his elder daughter Maria Vasilievna lived. He settled on Bolnichny Lane and served at one of the churches of Kuntsovo. It might be the church of the icon of Our Lady of the Sign. In 1929, the church of Saint Seraphim of Sarov, that was near the place of living of Father Valentin, was closed, while its parishioners joined the Church of Holy Mandelian on Saturn that many priests of the abolished parishes moved to, especially after, on the 26th of January 1933, the authorities of Kuntsovo announced the closure of the last church in the town. According to some sources, there also moved Father Valentin along with the prior of the Church of Saint Seraphim of Sarov, priest Sergius Felitsyn. In 1937, mass arrest of clergy and laymen began. At the same time, the clergy of the Church of Holy Mandelian on Saturn were arrested and executed. Priest Sergius Felitsyn and Alexei Kasimov, as well as deacon of the Church of Saint Seraphim of Sarov, Vladimir Krasnokutsky. Hieromonk Valentin continued his service up to his arrest, and shortly before it, he moved to serve the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Romashkovo in Odintsovo district of Moscow region. This was mentioned in the criminal case of Hieromonk Valentin, where a neighbor of him who lived on Bolnichny Lane said that a priest served at a church in the town of Kuntsovo, while then, according to gossips, at the church of Romashkovo. On the 26th of November in 1937, the NKVD officers interrogated two witnesses, the residents of the town of Kuntsovo, one of whom testified that Father Valentin talked with women one day in June 1937 and read a religious book to them, then explaining it. In the conversation he said that now we live in the period when the Orthodox Faith and the clergy are not highly valued by the Soviet government. Communists do their best to demolish the Orthodox Church totally, but believers must confront this with all their strength, spreading the word of God among their acquaintances, strengthening their faith, with hope that this tyranny will end. On the same day, Father Valentin was arrested and imprisoned in the Taganka prison in Moscow, being questioned the next day. On the 27th of November, the investigation was completed, and on the 29th of November 1937, the Troika of the NKVD sentenced Father Valentin to 10 years of imprisonment. Hieromonk Valentin Lukyanov died on the 1st of June 1940 in the labor camp in Novosibirsk region and was buried in an unknown grave. On the 24th of December 2004, monastic martyr Valentin was canonized by the decree of Holy Synod as new martyr and confessor of Russia. We are near the Church of the Nativity of Christ in Nemchinovka village, where holy martyrs Nikolai Gavarin and Yelisei Shtolder served.
Holy Martyr Yelisei was born on the 14th of June in 1883 in Smolensk in the family of the inspector's assistant Fyodor Shtolder. Due to father's service, the family moved from Smolensk to Tashkent and then to Moscow. In 1902, Yelisei Fedorovich finished 6 classes of Tashkent College and after moving to Moscow began to work as an accountant in the Department of Inland Revenue in the administration of Moscow-Brest Railway up to 1924. Yelisei Fedorovich married young lady Elena Afanasievna, and in 1908 their daughter Galina was born. During the time of persecutions of the Russian Orthodox Church, Yelisei Fedorovich decided to dedicate himself to serving to the Church. After the Church of Nativity of Christ in the village of Nemchinovka was opened, he was persuaded by the parishioners to manage the choir of the church, while on the 20th of October in 1920 was ordained a psalmist. Yelisei Fedorovich was ordained a deacon to this church by Metropolitan Yevsevy Krutitsky. Yelisei Fedorovich combined both serving at the church and secular work, but in 1924 his administration found out that he was a clergyman and he was fired. In 1934, the authorities closed the church in Nemchinovka, and the prior of the church, Alexei Sokolov, along with deacon Yelisei Shtolder, began to serve at the church of Nicholas, the Miracle Maker, in Romashkovo village. Here, Father Yelisei served until his arrest in 1937. At that time, the authorities began to collect information about all clergymen for the following arrest of the latter. The informers reported to NKVD that Yelisei Shtolder served as a deacon in Nikolskaya church, enlightening the believers and doing anti-Soviet agitation. In July 1937, 2 false witnesses were questioned. One of them testified that in 1933, when it was decided to close the church in Nemchinovka, Shtolder agitated the locals to prevent the closure. The deacon Yelisei was not just an ordinary clergyman, but a really dedicated one. The other false witness said that deacon Yelisei, before the holiday of the 1st May in 1936, advised the people to go to church instead of celebrating that holiday. On the 8th of August, the authorities arrested Father Yelisei, and he was imprisoned in Taganskaya prison in Moscow. "What made you become a clergyman?" asked him an investigator. "The first reason is my own desire, and the second one is that since childhood I have had a vocation to go into a church and loved divine service." "What political views did you have when you changed your work and service?" "When the church in the village of Nemchinovka was opened, after the persuasion of the parishioners, I agreed to serve at the church, as I was religious and it was at my heart's ease." "Do you admit your guilt?" asked the investigator in the end of the questioning. "I do not admit my guilt at any counter-revolutionary crimes," answered Deacon Yelisei. On the 19th of August in 1937, NKVD Troika sentenced him to firing squad. Deacon Yelisei Shtolder was executed on the 10th of December in 1937 and was entombed in the unknown pauper's grave on the Butova range area near Moscow. Holy Martyr Nikolai was born on the 23rd of December in 1870 in the town of Yakobstadt of Courland province in the family of clergyman Ivan Gavarin. In 1893, Nikolai graduated from the Spiritual Seminary of Riga with the first rank and finished the first course of Ecclesiastical Academy, being ordained a priest at the church in the town of Grodno. Since December 1903, the priest served at St. Sophia Cathedral of Grodno, and from 1906 to 1915 was a teacher of the law of God at private female gymnasium of Grodno. During the First World War in 1915, because of warlike activities, the clergy of the church were evacuated to Moscow, and Father Nikolai began to serve at the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker on Shepi near Smolenskaya Square. After the revolution, the Soviet authorities began to evict those they considered socially alien, and first of all, it concerned the clergy. In 1930, being deprived of the place to live, Father Nikolai firstly moved to the village Kontsevo near Moscow, then settled in the village of Nemchinovka and began to serve at the Church of the Nativity of Christ. At the end of 1934, a new chairman of the village council of Nemchinovka forbade the parish meeting as well as bell ringing, and later ordered to take the bells off, while on the 20th of September 1935 it was ordered to close the church. Both the petition with 2,000 signatures of the faithful and the intercession of Archbishop of Bisk and Altai Innocent Sokolov, who lived on retirement in Nemchinovka, were helpless. All the members of the clergy, including Archpriest Alexei Sokolov, Priest Nikolai Gavarin, as well as Deacon Yelisei Shtolda, had to move to the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Romashkovo. In 1937, when the secret decree about mass repressions by Joseph Stalin came into effect, the investigator of NKVD of Kuntsevo made lists of people he was going to arrest, as well as the lists of false witnesses who could give false testifies. On the 29th of August in 1937, according to false testifies, Priest Nikolai Gavarin was arrested and imprisoned in Taganskaya prison in Moscow, and on the 15th of September, the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Nikolai to 10 years of imprisonment in a labor camp, and he was exiled to Ukht-Pechleg. At that time, several relatives of the convicted began to complain of their own sentence, trying to prove their guiltlessness. A new investigation was begun, the witnesses were questioned once again, and at last they confessed that they slandered the people. According to the new investigation, in 1939, it was reported that the convicted were sentenced wrongly. But due to the fact that the convicted were still believers, and what is more, clergymen, the sentence was decided to remain unchanged. Priest Nikolai Gavarin died on the 24th of April in 1938 in Ukht-Pechleg and was buried in an unknown grave. On the 24th of December 2004, Holy Martyr Nikolai Gavarin was canonized by the decree of the Holy Synod as new martyr and confessor of Russia.
We are at the Church of the Intercession of the Mother of God in Berkhuchkovo village, where Holy Martyr Alexander Vinogradov served.
Holy Martyr Alexander was born on the 1st of June in 1884 in the family of an official psalmist, Ivan Mikhailovich Vinogradov, who worked at refectory at the Church of the Resurrection of Christ, that is, at Vagankovskaya Cemetery in Moscow. In 1899, Alexander finished Donskoye Spiritual College and in 1905 graduated from Moscow Spiritual Seminary. On the 1st of October in 1909, he was ordained a priest and served at the Church of Transfiguration of Christ in Lyubitsy village, Moscow region. In 1920, Father Alexander was called for a military service that he did in Riga militia. In 1929 he became an archpriest, and in 1932 he was ordained with a priest's club. When in November 1933, in Berkhuchkovo village of the Zvenigorod district, the priest died, on the 21st of November, Archpriest Alexander Vinogradov was appointed to the Church of the Intercession of the Mother of God of that village, where he served upon his arrest. During the arrests of believers in the summer of 1937, the government decided to arrest Archpriest Alexander. On the 27th of November, in 1937, he was arrested and kept in preliminary detention cell in the Zvenigorod police station, and in several days was transferred to Taganskaya prison in Moscow. On the 5th of December in 1937, The NKVD Troika sentenced Father Alexander to 10 years of imprisonment in a labor camp. He was sent to the Far East. On the 22nd of September in 1942, Archpriest Alexander Vinogradov died from pellagra in the town of Svobodny and was buried in an unknown grave. On the 25th of March in 2004, Archpriest Alexander Vinogradov was canonized by the decree of the Holy Synod as new Martyr and Confessor of Russia.
We are at the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the Sidorovskaya village where Martyr Fyodor Gusev served.
Martyr Fyodor Gusev was born on the 22nd of April in 1874 in the village of Sidorovskaya of Zvenigrad County in Moscow province, in the family of a peasant. In 1912, Fyodor Fyodorovich was elected a preposter by the fellow villagers occupying this post up to the time when the Bolsheviks took power. In 1929, Fyodor Fyodorovich entered the church council at the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in Sidorovskaya instead of his relative Sergei, while in 1932 he joined collective farming. In 1933, Fyodor Gusev and priest Fyodor Dobrokhvalov were brought criminally liable after a claim of the female parishioner who said that both the priest of the local church and the church paymaster insulted her. Both of them were sentenced to 6 months of correctional labor, but Moscow Regional Court did not accept the accusation as the valid one, and that's why the sentence was cancelled. For the second time, Fyodor Gusev was brought criminally liable in 1935, with a reference of the loss of some items from church property. The court of Zvenigrad district accused him of oversight, and he was put on probation for a year. In the first half of 1937, the persecutions of the church became much more severe, and Ivan, the son of Fyodor Fyodorovich, began to persuade his father to leave the church, as the authorities wanted to arrest him. According to the reminiscences of Yevdokia Fedorovna, Ivan said to his father, "Father, leave the church, as you are being tracked down. They will arrest you, put behind bars, and we will be shamed." "I won't leave the church," answered Fyodor Fyodorovich. "I won't deny God. They will arrest me for believing in God, but not for any hooliganism, so let these atheists track me down." Fyodor Fyodorovich was arrested on the 21st of August in 1937, being accused of counter-revolutionary activity against the Soviets and the government. He was firstly imprisoned in a preliminary detention cell in the Golitsino police station, later being sent to Zvenigrad prison. All the time the relatives of Fyodor Fyodorovich sent him parcels to Zvenigrad prison. Later, Fyodor Fyodorovich was transferred to Butyrskaya prison, then to Taganskaya. On the 17th of September, the indictment of the criminal case of Fyodor Fyodorovich Gusev was drawn up. There was stated that Fyodor Fyodorovich Gusev did counter-revolutionary activity among collective farmers, spreading veiled counter-revolutionary slander against the Soviets, defending the executed enemies of the people, also expressing terroristic ideas connected with the members of the Soviet government. On the 11th of October in 1937, the NKVD Troika sentenced Gusev Fyodor Fyodorovich to 10 years of imprisonment in a labor camp, with the term starting from the 24th of August 1937. Fyodor Fyodorovich was sent to Yugoslavia in Amur region. In his last letter, the convicted wrote, "My legs are swelling. The tumor is above the knees. I feel myself badly. Probably I will die on the island soil." Fyodor Fyodorovich Gusev died on the 1st of February in 1940 in Yugoslavia and was buried in the unknown grave, while according to some sources he was executed even earlier, in 1939. In 2005, Martyr Fyodor Gusev was canonized as new Martyr and Confessor of Russia.
We're next to the Church of the Transfiguration in Большие Везёмы village, where several new martyrs served. Holy martyrs Vasily Gorbachev, Nikolai Zapolsky, Alexander Tsysterov, as well as Martyr Elizabeth Timotheva.
Holy Martyr Vasily was born on the 4th of April 1885 in the village of Naryshkina in Serdobsky district in Saratov province, in the family of peasant Grigory Gorbachev. He finished the parish school, took a fancy for singing in a church choir, serving at the church with pleasure. This became the business of his life. Until 20 years of age, he helped his father with his household, but in 1905, when his father decided to marry Vasily off without his desire, the latter went to the Iversky Strasnoy monastery in the city of Saratov, and from there moved to the St. Daniel's monastery in Moscow, where at first he sang in the choir, later becoming an obedient. In 1913, Innocentii Pustinsky, Bishop of Turkestan and Tashkent, invited Vasily Grigorovich to the town of Verny, now it's Almaty, and there he served as housekeeper at the bishop's house. At that time, the young obedient learned to play the violin, gained perfect knowledge of choir singing, becoming the head of a big choir. He was appointed a psalm reader to the Alexander Nevsky Seminary Church in the city of Tashkent in 1914. In 1915, Vasily was mobilized into the army and appointed a psalm reader for the regimental marching church. In 1918, Vasily married Vera Afanasyevna Trofimova, and in August of the same year he was ordained a deacon to the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker on Turkestan railway station on Tashkent Railroad. Because of some difficulties, the couple decided to move to the village of Vannoskaya of Cherneva district of Sirdarya region, where Father Vasily served from 1918 to 1923. In 1923, Deacon Vasily decided to return to his home place, coming with his family to Saratov and beginning serving at the Peter and Paul Cathedral. In 1929, the famine in the Volga region began. The persecution of the church intensified, and if the authorities could not immediately close the church, then they demanded paying more and more taxes. Bread cards were introduced everywhere, but the clergy and their families did not receive them. To earn a living, Father Vasily built stoves, wings of the roof, and repaired clocks. One day a tax inspector who came to the house found Father Vasily for dragging a mattress. The tax inspector asked why the deacon would not leave the church in such a difficult time and would not get another job. Father Vasily replied that he had devoted himself to church service in accordance with his convictions and would never leave this path. Until at least one church is open, I will serve there. The deacon treated the church and the priesthood reverently, extremely honestly, with particular attention, as he had chosen this way, with desire and love. Father Vasily's children said that he was distinguished by his generosity and mercy and meek spirit. At the beginning of the 1930s, the famine in the Volga region forced Father Vasily to leave Saratov with his family. Father Vasily settled in the Moscow region and was sent to the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of Kazan in the village of Markovo. Later he was appointed to the Church of the Resurrection of Christ in the village of Ilyinsky Pogost in Korovskoy district. In 1936, Father Vasily was transferred to the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Parfentyevo in Kolomna district, where he also renovated the wall paintings. In the autumn of 1936, the priest of St. Nicholas Church was arrested, and since there was no one to serve, the church was closed. The parishioners begged Deacon Vasily to become a priest, and in October 1937 he was ordained a priest, and the worship in this church was resumed. The authorities, however, did not leave the intention to close the church, and in the beginning of 1938 the church was closed by them. On the 13th of January 1938, Father Vasily was appointed to the Transfiguration Church in the village of Большие Vezomy of Zvenigrad district, and on the 15th of February in 1938, on the feast of the Presentation of our Lord Jesus, the priest was arrested by the NKVD officers. When the wife suggested Father Vasily to dress secular clothes for a prison, Father Vasily answered her, "No, I will go in a cassock. I have dedicated all my life to this." Before leaving, he put on his winter robe and a skufia and told his wife to look for him nowhere, and if he were alive he would give the news about himself. Father Vasily was imprisoned in Mozhaisk prison, and on the 19th of February in 1938 the NKVD Troika sentenced him to death. and Father Vasily was transferred to Taganskaya prison in Moscow. Priest Vasily Gorbachev was executed on the 26th of February in 1938 and was buried in the unknown grave in Butovo near Moscow. The children found out the fate of Father Vasily only in 1989. Holy Martyr Vasily was canonized as the new martyr and confessor of Russia by the decree of Holy Synod of the Russian Orthodox Church on the 17th of July 2001. Holy Martyr Nikolai was born in 1889 in the village of Sivkovo of Moscow County in Moscow Province, in the family of priest Alexander Zapolsky, who served at the Church of Transfiguration of Christ. In 1907 Nikolai finished the spiritual college and in 1910 became a psalmist at the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of the Sign in Lysitsino village near Narofaminsk. At the same time he married priest's daughter, Maria. Later the couple had 6 children. In 1920 Nikolai Alexandrovich was ordained a deacon to the same church. In 1925 Deacon Nikolai was transferred to the Church of the Transfiguration of Christ of Bolshoye Vezomy in Zvenigrad district in Moscow region. In 1929 Deacon Nikolai was accused of illegal cutting down the forest and sentenced to 2 years of exile, but the sentence was replaced by a fine. In 1930, Deacon Nikolai was arrested for non-fulfillment of state firewood and was sentenced to 6 months of correctional labor. In February 1938, investigators questioned false witnesses who gave testifies needed for the investigation. On the 21st of March 1938, Deacon Nikolai was arrested and imprisoned in one of Moscow prisons. During the questionings that lasted for a month and a half, the convicted denied his guilt. On the 2nd of June, the NKVD Troika sentenced Deacon Nikolai to firing squad. Deacon Nikolai Zapolsky was executed on the 27th of June in 1938 and was buried in the unknown grave in Butovo near Moscow. In 1939, the staff members of the Zvenigrad NKVD department were arrested being accused of falsification of criminal cases and were sentenced to different terms of deprivation. The criminal case of Deacon Nikolai Zapolsky became a piece of evidence and was reviewed by the War Tribunal of the NKVD. Nevertheless, taking into consideration the social status of the convicted as a clergyman, it was decided to let the execution stand. On the 24th of July 1989, Nikolai Alexandrovich Zapolsky was rehabilitated by a persecution service of Moscow region on the subject of the repressions of the year 1938. Holy Martyr Nikolai was canonized as a new martyr and confessor by the decree of the Holy Synod of the Russian Orthodox Church on the 6th of October 2001.
Martyr Elizabeth was born in 1881 in the town of Vinov in Tulskaya province in the family of peasant Alexander Martynov. In 1912, Elizabeth married a widower with 4 children, Timofey Gerasimovich Timokhin, who served as a gendarme non-commissioned officer at Galitina station near Moscow. Although Timofey Gerasimovich served at a gendarme department, in fact he cooperated with the revolutionaries, giving them warnings about searches and arrests that the gendarme department was going to make. Before marriage, Elizabeth Alexandrovna earned for a living being a dressmaker, while after the marriage she attended to the education of children. In 1922, she was elected to the Church Council of the Transfiguration Church in the village of Bolshoye Vezomy of Zvenigrad country. Since that time, she did her best for the sake of the parish that had many problems because of the persecutions of the atheistic authorities that tried to close the church. In January 1938, NKVD department of Zvenigrad was ordered to arrest the believers of the district. The chairman of the Zvenigrad department made the list of people to arrest, and Elizabeth Alexandrovna was also there, due to the fact that she was one of the members of the church council and the wife of the former gendarme officer. Then, the group of witnesses that agreed to sign the needed testifies was found. Elizabeth Alexandrovna was arrested on the 16th of February 1938, being questioned on the same day, and on the 27th of February 1938, the NKVD Troika sentenced Elizabeth Alexandrovna to firing squad. Elizabeth Alexandrovna Timokhina was executed on the 7th of March in 1938 and was entombed in the unknown pauper's grave on the Butovo Range area near Moscow. On the 18th of August in 2004, Martyr Elizabeth was canonized by the decree of the Holy Synod.
We are next to the Church of Michael the Archangel, where the new martyr Grigory Voynov served from June 1931 to November 1937.
Holy Martyr Grigory was born on the 26th of January in 1875 in the village of Teplistan of Moscow district in the family of psalmist Alexander Voynov. Graduating from Bethany Ecclesiastical Seminary, he became a teacher at parish school at the Church of the Icon of the Mother of God of Kazan at Kalushsky Varota. Then he married and the couple had 6 children. In 1900, Grigory Alexandrovich was inducted into a church office at the Church of the Holy Trinity in Teplistan village, where he served until 1931. In 1907, he was awarded with a waistcloth, in 1912 with a skufia, while in 1916 with a coif. In 1922, during the ejectment of church values, Father Grigory objected against the ejectment of the silver cross that had been given to the church in the 17th century. The same day, the ejection committee commissioner reported to the local police department, writing, "During the ejection of church values from the Trinity Church, in response to my words that these values would help the starving, the priest, in the presence of people, began anti-Soviet agitation, saying that gold and silver will be melted into cigarette cases. I ask you to take measures towards him." On the authority of that message, on the 6th of May in 1922, the head of the local police department ordered to arrest the priest. The same day, Father Grigory was arrested and questioned on the 16th of May. The priest answered to the investigator, "During the ejectment, we were taken away a silver cross. It was about 300 years old. I asked to leave it to us, as it would likely to be remelted into a cigar case in America or somewhere else, but for us it is quite valuable. I didn't agitate it against ejectment at all." The case was referred to court-martial, which sentenced Father Grigory to 3 years of imprisonment. Then the case was transferred to the Revolutionary Tribunal. During the process in November and December, Father Grigory refused to confess his guilt, repeating the testify given during the preliminary investigation. He was set free by the authorities in 7 months. In 1924, Father Grigory was awarded with a pectoral cross, becoming an archpriest in 1928. In June 1931, Archpriest Grigory was transferred to the Church of Michael the Archangel in Kubenka village of Zvenigrad district. But on the 27th of November in 1937, Father Grigory was arrested and imprisoned in Taganka prison in Moscow. He was committed of anti-Soviet agitation again. Late at night on the 29th of November, the investigator questioned the priest, who denied his guilt again. On the 3rd of December, the NKVD Troika sentenced him to an execution. Archpriest Grigory Voynov was executed on the 8th of December in 1937 and buried in the unknown pauper's grave on Butovo firing range ground near Moscow. On the 22nd of February 2001, Archpriest Grigory Voynov was canonized by the decree of the Holy Synod as a new martyr and confessor of Russia.
We are near the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker, where 2 new martyrs served, Archpriest Alexander Tsitsarov and Archimandrite Joseph Boyev. Here there are also the icons in their honor. Here there is a memorial stone with the names of priests who served in Nikolskaya Church.
Holy Martyr Alexander was born on the 25th of August in 1884 in Pavadimovo village of Simbirsk province in the family of peasant Mikhail Tsitsarov. Alexander graduated from Abshar Ecclesiastical Seminary for Teachers in 1903, being a teacher at a parish school in Simbirsk province until 1908. Like many teachers of these years, Alexander Mikhailovich took part in revolutionary activity and even joined the Party of Social Democrats in 1904. Later the party was demolished and some of its members were arrested. Revolutionary events which Alexander was a witness, the rampant atheism and immorality connected with it, made the future priest think deeply about the causes of what was happening and make conclusions. In 1908, Alexander became a teacher at Nizhikhinskaya parish school in Simbirsk province. He studied at the pastoral courses in Moscow and on the 20th of April in 1914 became a priest at Vladimirskaya church in Ostashovo village of Moscow province and was appointed as a missionary. Also that year, Father Alexander organized religious readings for the workers of Sadkov manufacture. While in the village of Ostashovo, he set up a cooperative organization, being its chairman for the next 2 years. In November 1916, Father Alexander was transferred to serve in St. Nicholas Church in Nikolskoye village of Moscow district. In 1926 he was awarded with a Pectoral Cross, and in 1932 he became an archpriest, being appointed as a dean of Zenigrad district. Archpriest Alexander was an outstanding preacher. People came to listen to his sermons from the most distant villages. Father Alexander loved his parish, and the parish loved him in response. Dedicating his life to Lord, he was ready to serve people, never waiting for or demanding fees for their occasional services, and when he could, he helped the needy, not only with a piece of advice, but also with money, and if a person was ill, with medicine. Father Alexander paid much attention to labor. He did not like idleness, which he regarded as the cause of many evils. He was affectionate and attentive with kids, but was strict to all sorts of deviations from the Christian commandments. Giving great importance to prayer, he said, "If you pray to God and His saints, you'll always get help from them. We must sincerely believe to keep the commandments of God, and then we will get help." In January 1937, Archpriest Alexander became a prior of the Transfiguration Church of the village of Большие Везёмы in Zenigrad district. Less than a year he served at this church, when the rising vortex of persecutions began to demolish the Orthodoxy. On the 27th of November, Father Alexander was arrested by the NKVD, and after several days of questioning in the Zenigrad prison, he was transferred to the Taganka prison in Moscow. The investigation lasted only for 1 day. On the 3rd of December 1937, the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Alexander to 10 years of imprisonment in a labor camp, and he was sent to the town of Svobodny in Khabarovsk region and was imprisoned in the Amur railway camp of NKVD. In September 1939, the wife of the archpriest and his children sent a letter to the head of the NKVD, Beria, with a request to review the case of Father Alexander. In his turn, earlier, Father Alexander filled a petition to review the case. Once again, the same witnesses were questioned, and some of them even denied their testifying given earlier. And in November, the investigator proposed to cancel the verdict and release the priest. After reviewing the case, another investigator only suggested changing a sentence. On the 13th of February in 1940, the investigation on the NKVD in the Moscow region decided to change the punishment to 5 years in exile in Krasnoyarsk County, but it could not take place. Archpriest Alexander Tsitsarov died on the 9th of September in 1939 in Burya labor camp of NKVD on Izvestkovaya station and was buried in the unmarked grave. In August of 2000, Archpriest Alexander Tsitsarov was canonized by the decree of Holy Synod as new martyr and confessor of Russia. Monastic martyr Iosaf Ivan Vasilievich Boev was born on the 20th of April in 1879 in Moscow. According to his own story, he was the son of a peasant of the Ural province of the Mal-Yaroslavets county of the village Krasnoye. Due to poverty, the father could not provide the son with an education, and the boy hardly finished 2 classes of school and was sent to study shoemanship. Later, Ivan Vasilievich became a master and worked up to 21 years of age for different people. But he didn't comprehend this life in view of excessive drinking and lechery, and as he didn't have a calling to marriage, he retired to the monastery called Berlykovskaya Hermitage. In 1912, Ivan Vasilievich took monastic vows with the name Iosaf, and in 1914 he was transferred to the Savinsky Metochion, where he served until 1918, and later he moved to Nikolsky Monastery in Moscow. In 1921, Iosaf was ordained a hero monk, being mobilized for the Rio militia the same year. but was excused from military service for work in the Moscow agrarian department as a beekeeper. In the end of 1923, the bee garden was eliminated and the priest returned to the monastery. In July 1924, Father Yosaf was invited to the village of Aratskaya as a priest, and in March 1926 to the village of Simsky factory. During this time, Father Yosaf was arrested once and was called for the interrogation several times. In June 1927, Archimandrite Yosaf was arrested by the OGPU and was condemned by doing a contra-revolution. On the 5th of December in 1927, the OGPU sentenced Archimandrite Yosaf to 3 years in exile. He was deported to the Tobolsk region. Upon termination of the exile in 1930, Archimandrite Yosaf arrived to Ufa and began to serve at the Church of Simeon of Verity. In November 1931, the OGPU found out that at the church there were conversations with the believing youth and broad charity was led. After the investigation, priest Yosaf was charged for heading the counter-revolutionary organization, and on the 13th of April in 1932, the OGPU sentenced Archimandrite Yosaf to 3 years of imprisonment, which he spent in Krasnovisharia labor camps. Upon his return, Father Yosaf served at the church on Taganka in Moscow, and then in April 1937 moved to Nikolskaya village of the Zvigorod district and served at St. Nicholas Church. On the 27th of November in 1937, Archimandrite Yosaf was arrested on the charge of counter-revolutionary activity and imprisoned in Taganskaya prison in Moscow. On the interrogations, Father Yosaf flatly refused to plead guilty. On the 5th of December in 1937, the NKVD Troika sentenced him to firing squad. Archimandrite Yosaf Boyev was executed on the 10th of December in 1937 and was entombed in the unknown Popa's grave on the Buto Range area near Moscow. In 2000, Archimandrite Yosaf Boyev was canonized by the decree of the Holy Synod as a new martyr and confessor of Russia.
The history of the past century clearly shows us where people who denied God are able to go. It was a special time for the Christian Church, not only in Russia, but all over the world. But evil is powerless against firm proving of verity and can be defeated only by love. Those who suffer for the Christian beliefs suffer not for their own mistakes and sins, but take part in the passions of our God, Jesus Christ, suffering together with Christ. The martyrs showed us the new level of God's love in people's hearts, the victory of God before whom the evil is powerless.
Here is the Trinity Church in Troitskoye village, where holy martyr Alexander Derzhavin served.
Holy Confessor Alexander was born on the 13th of August in 1864 in the village of Zelentsino of Kalinsky district in Moscow province, in the family of priest Sergei Ivanovich Derzhavin, who served at the local church of the Nativity of Virgin Mary. In 1880, Alexander finished Zvigorod Religious School and in 1887 graduated from Bethany Theological Seminary. The same year he married and was ordained a priest to the Church of the Nativity of Virgin Mary in the village of Alexandrovo in Zvigorod district of Moscow province. Here the priest served for 10 years, and in 1897 he was transferred to the Trinity Church in Troitskoye village of the same county. In 1929, during the persecutions of the Russian Orthodox Church, the OGPU planned to make arrests in the Troitskoye village, and on the 2nd of January in 1930, Father Alexander was arrested along with 2 members of the Church Council. All of the arrested were imprisoned in the Butyrskaya prison in Moscow, and the next day Father Alexander was questioned. Throughout the whole January, an investigator interrogating witnesses wrote, "The political face of Derzhavin is too difficult both to reveal and to study. Personally, I believe that the arrest of Derzhavin was premature and aimless. The villagers consider the arrest of Derzhavin to be the persecution of the faith, and not to be the arrest of any counter-revolutionary." Father Alexander was accused of the following, together with the active members of the Church Council who were closely connected in their church affairs, for a long time systematically agitated against the Soviets, contradicted the measures taken in the village by the Soviet authorities and the party. On the 13th of February in 1930, a special meeting at the board of the EGPU sentenced Father Alexander to 3 years of exile in the northern region, and a month later he was sent to Arkhangelsk. Due to his age, Father Alexander could not do heavy physical work, and as there was no another work for the exiled, he had to live only for account of the parcels and money that his children sent. Due to the apartness of the place of the exile, as well as the season of bad roads and other circumstances, the parcels weren't received regularly, in addition being stolen. Father Alexander shared things he got from his children with his compatriot, priest Fyodor Voskresensky, who had almost nobody to help. On the 22nd of August in 1930, Father Alexander, along with 20 disabled priests, was transferred from Ust-Silm to the village of Ust. Father Alexander's health conditions became worse. On the 31st of May 1932, according to the new decree of the EGPU, Father Alexander had to return to Ust-Silm with his possessions. The priest was announced that he had to move to the village of Zigrin. Despite the period of his punishment expired on the 2nd of January in 1933, the authorities did not let the priest move to his son's place and live on a maintenance as he asked. At the beginning of March the same year, Father Alexander began to feel severe ache in his stomach, which became stronger and stronger day after day, while his health conditions worsened. Priest Alexander Derzhavin died on the 25th of March in 1933 and was buried in the unmarked grave on the village cemetery, perhaps in the village of Zigrin, but the exact place of his grave is still unknown. The permission on free inhabitancy was given a month later after his death, on the 6th of April in 1933. On the 12th of March 2002, Holy Martyr Alexander Derzhavin was canonized by the decree of the Holy Synod as new martyr and confessor of Russia.
We are next to the Church of the Transfiguration in Krymsky village, where Holy Martyr Nikolai Sokolov served.
Holy Martyr Nikolai was born on the 20th of March in 1877 in the village of Andreevskaya in Ruzy County in Moscow province, in the family of Alexander Yefimovich Sokolov, who was appointed a sexton at the Church of St. Andrew Stratolates, instead of his father Yefim Sergeyevich, on the 19th of December 1867. In the big and friendly family of Alexander Yefimovich and his wife Natalia Vasilievna, Nikolai was the firstborn son. In 1898, Nikolai Sokolov graduated from Moscow Spiritual Seminary with the first rank and was appointed a teacher to the parish school of the village of Krymskaya in Verity County. At that time, Nikolai Alexandrovich married Ekaterina Ivanovna, the daughter of Ivan Nikolaevich Mitropolsky, who was the priest at the Church of Transfiguration of Christ in the village of Krymskaya. Father Nikolai Sokolov and his wife Ekaterina Ivanovna had 7 children. On the 2nd of September 1899, Nikolai Sokolov was ordained a priest to the Church of Transfiguration of Christ by Bishop Nestor of Dmitrov, the vicar of Moscow Diocese. Father Nikolai combined his pastoral care with educational activities. Since 1899, he was both the teacher of Law of God and the head teacher at the parish school of Krymskaya, also teaching the Law of God at Zemstvo School of the same village. Since 1902, Father Nikolai also taught the Law of God at Zemstvo schools in nearby villages. Since 1909 to 1915, he was a member of the Diocesan College Council of Ruza, being a member of the board of Zvenigrad Spiritual College in 1911. Priest Nikolai Sokolov was considered to be a good preacher, a diligent pastor, and a teacher of the Law of God. In 1909, for pastoral and educational work on enlightening people with the verity of Christ at parish at Zemstvo schools of Ruzy County, Father Nikolai was awarded with a purple velvet scoffia. In 1915, his work was also praised, and Father Nikolai was awarded with a coif. In 1924, he was ordained an archpriest, while in 1931 was awarded with a mitra.
In the 1930s, he was a rural dean of Veria and Mazhaisk districts. In 1930, the household of the priest was severely taxed, so that Father Nikolai couldn't pay. He had to sell some of his property. The same year, the priest was dispossessed. In 1931, Father Nikolai was arrested and after spending a month behind bars, was given freedom. On the 11th of October 1937, in the heat of the repressions on the Russian Orthodox Church, Archpriest Nikolai was arrested and imprisoned in Mazhaisk prison, then in Taganskaya prison in Moscow. On the 28th of October, the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Nikolai to capital punishment. He was executed on the 21st of October 1937 and was entombed in the unknown Popa's grave on the Butovo firing range near Moscow. In 1940, the priest's wife, who knew nothing about the destiny of her husband, appealed to the NKVD to review the case. After the reviewing, the prosecutor's assistant made a conclusion that the decision of the Troika was made according to the material of the case. The sentence matches the crime, so the grievance cannot be settled. On the 7th of October in 2002, Archpriest Nikolai was canonized by the decree of Holy Synod as new martyr and confessor of Russia.
We are at the church of Michael the Archangel in Mikhailovskaya village, where Holy Martyr Parfeny Gruzinov served.
Holy Martyr Parfeny was born on the 30th of January in 1874 in the village of Troitskaya Ryazantsovo in Bogorodsk country in the Moscow province in the family of psalmist Vasily Gruzinov, who served at the Trinity Church for 30 years. He died when Parfeny was 11 years old. Parfeny's mother, Paraskeva Petrovna, made unleavened bread at the Petnitskaya church at Trinity Sergius Lavra. At the age of 8, Parfeny began to study at a town college. In 1890, he finished Pereira Spiritual College, graduating from Bethany Spiritual Seminary in 1896, and from Moscow Ecclesiastical Academy in 1900. In 1901, Metropolitan Vladimir Bogayevlensky ordained Parfeny Vasilievich a psalmist at the church of Protomartyr Stephan beyond the Yauza, and 2 years later to the church of Saint Sophia at Lubyanka. Later, he served at different Moscow churches before he was ordained a priest to the church of Protomartyr Stephan beyond the Yauza, becoming its last priest before its closure and destruction in the spring of 1932. In 1935, Father Parfeny was sent to serve at the Church of Michael the Archangel in Mikhailovskaya village of Zvenigorod district in Moscow region. In the second half of 1937, mass arrests began, and the NKVD officers began to question witnesses. In the early February of 1938, such witnesses were questioned in the village of Mikhailovskaya too. The questioned chairman of the village council testified that Father Parfeny might say that the Soviet constitution is a false law, while the religious law is the best for all people. He called believers to strengthen the faith. In the middle of May, Gruzinov agitated the collective farmers not to work and disrupted the spring seeding in that way. Under authority of such testifiers, the documents on the arrest of the priest were prepared, and on the 15th of February in 1938, Father Parfeny was arrested, imprisoned in Mazhaisk prison, and questioned on the following day. After several days of questioning, on the 19th of February in 1938, the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Parfeny to firing squad. Priest Parfeny Gruzinov was executed on the 26th of February in 1938 and entombed in the unknown Popa's grave on the Butovo range area near Moscow. In 1939, the staff members of the Zvenigorod police station, including those who sentenced Father Parfeny, were arrested, being accused of falsification of criminal cases, and were sentenced to different terms of deprivation. The War Tribunal of the NKVD reviewed the case of priest Parfeny Gruzinov on the 13th of March in 1940.
Nevertheless, by the decree of the investigative department of the NKVD, taking into consideration the social status of Gruzinov, it was decided to let the execution stand. On the 12th of March in 2002, Holy Martyr Parthenia was canonized by the decree of the Holy Synod as new martyr and confessor of Russia.
According to some sources, at the Church of Michael the Archangel in the village of Mikhailovskaya served monastic martyr Xenophontos Bondarenko. Monastic martyr Xenophontos Konstantin Andreevich Bondarenko was born on the 13th of May in 1886 in the village of Nikitovka of Valuisk County in Voronezhsk province in the family of a peasant. After finishing Kopano-Nikitovskoye College, Konstantin helped his father around the household. On the 21st of January 1910, Konstantin joined the Trinity Surges Lavra, and on the 28th of May in 1916 was accepted as an obedient, while on the 15th of June the same year he took monastic vows with name Xenophontos and became an assistant of Kronit Lubimov, who was the hegumen of the Lavra. In 1918, monk Xenophontos was ordained a monk deacon, while in 1926 he became a hieromonk. After the Lavra was closed in 1919, Father Xenophontos stayed there as a locksmith at the Commission of Preserving of Monuments of Art and Antiquity. In 1924 he moved to Petrograd and worked as a mechanic at different factories, but then returned to Moscow and by the church authorities was sent to different churches, where a priest was needed. In 1932, Father Xenophontos served at the Church of Michael the Archangel in the Mikhailovskaya village of Zvenigrad district in Moscow region. Having a desire to stay there permanently, he gave his passport to the village council, but its chairman noticed that the priest was written down there as a worker, as Father Xenophontos got it while working at a factory, and the passport was sent to OGPU. Father Xenophontos had to return to Moscow as he was afraid of persecutions, and he was transferred to serve at the Trinity Church in the village of Konkovo near Moscow. He served there for about a year, when it became clear that OGPU were going to arrest him. In order to avoid it, church authorities sent Father Xenophontos to serve at the Church of St. Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Alexeyevskaya of Solnechnogorsk district in Moscow region. In January 1935, the OGPU officer questioned the deacon of the church in Alexeyevskaya, who gave false testify against Father Xenophontos, with whom he served. After that, some more locals of Alexeyevskaya village were questioned and they also testified in the way that was needed for the OGPU. Father Xenophontos was arrested on the 12th of March and imprisoned in Taganskaya prison in Moscow. On the 21st of March in 1935 the investigation was over. Hieromonk Xenophontos was accused of systematic anti-Soviet agitation among the peasants of Alexeyevskaya village, spreading provocative gossips about the fast death of the Soviets and imposing the peasants' anti-Soviet ideas. On the 21st of March in 1935, the special meeting of OGPU sentenced Father Xenophontos to 3 years of imprisonment in a labor camp, and he was sent to Temnikov labor camp of the town of Potima, spending there all the time. In August 1937 he returned from Temnikov labor camp, and because of the prohibition on living near Moscow, he had to settle in the town of Alexandrov in Vladimirskaya region. At that time more severe persecutions on the Russian Orthodox Church began, and the NKVD officers collected information and watched people who, in their point of view, were subject to arrest, and first of all it concerned clergymen. That is why the Father Xenophontos' visit to Archimandrite Kronit Lubimov in Zagorsk could not remain unnoticed. After that, Hieromonk Xenophontos visited Archimandrite Kronit several times more, and when on the 20th of November in 1937 both Father Kronit and his assistant were arrested, the Archimandrite was visited by him too. The arrested monks were imprisoned in Taganskaya prison in Moscow. On the 7th of December in 1937, the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Xenophontos to firing squad. Both Hieromonk Xenophontus and Archimandrite Chronit were executed on the 10th of December in 1937 and entombed in the unknown Pope's grave on the Butovo Range area near Moscow. On the 17th of August in 2004, Hieromonk Xenophontus Bondarenko was canonized by the decree of the Holy Synod.
We are at the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in Aksinino village, where new martyrs George Kolokolov and Dmitry Smirnov served.
Holy Martyr Georgy was born on the 22nd of October in 1876 in Moscow, in the family of Deacon Joseph Kolokolov. In 1898, Georgy graduated from Moscow Spiritual Seminary and in 1899 was ordained a deacon to the Church of the Transfiguration of Christ in the village of Spasskaya Tushino of Moscow County. In 1904, Deacon Georgy was ordained a priest to the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Aksinino of Zvenigrad district and was appointed as a teacher of the Law of God at Aksinino National College and County Parish School, having this position until 1918. Since 1908 he bore obedience as the teacher of the Law of God at Lipkin College in the same county. In 1924, for zealous and diligent serving, Father Georgy was awarded with a pectoral cross, while in 1927 he was ordained an archpriest, being awarded with a priest club in 1930. In 1931, the authorities closed the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in Aksinino, arrested Father Georgy, sentencing him to 5 years of imprisonment. He spent a year being confined at hard labor, while from March 1932 until June 1933 he worked as an accountant in one of the departments of Solovki prison camp in Camp Station Sinuha. Upon his return in 1933, John Shirokov, the Bishop of Orekhovo-Zuyevo and the Vicar of Moscow Diocese, appointed Archpriest Georgy a prior at the Church of St. Paraskeva in the village of Tugoles at Shatursky district in Moscow region. In 1934, Archpriest Georgy was awarded with a pectoral cross with precious stones, and in 1935 with a mitre. In 1937 there was a time of severest persecutions of clergy, priests, psalmists, choir clerks and monks. In Testifies against Archpriest Georgy Kolokolov it was written about the anti-Soviet agitation of him and other priests of the Church of St. Paraskeva in the village of Tugoles of Shatursky district, Archpriest Nazarius Gribkov and psalmist Peter Tsarapkin. The authorities arrested the priests on the 27th of November 1937 and imprisoned them in Butyrskaya prison in Moscow. On the 5th of December 1937, the End of the Troika sentenced Archpriest Georgy Kolokolov to capital punishment. He was executed on the 9th of December 1937 and was entombed in the unknown Pope's grave on the Butovo firing range area near Moscow. In 1989, Archpriest Georgy Kolokolov was rehabilitated, while in August 2000, Archpriest Georgy was canonized by the decree of the Holy Synod as new Martyr and Confessor of Russia. Holy Martyr Dmitry was born in 1868 in the village of Chernyaevo of Dmitrovsky County of Moscow Province in the family of Vasily Timofeyevich Smirnov, who served as a priest for 47 years. In 1883, Dmitry Vasilievich finished Zvenigrad Spiritual College and for several years lived with his parents in the Troitskoye village of Zvenigrad County of Moscow Province, where his father was a prior of the Trinity Church. He, in Troitskoye, in 1874, in the family of priest Vasily, another son, Vsevolod, was born. Later he also became a priest and was canonized. In April 1889, Dmitry Smirnov became a psalmist at the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of Kazan in the Kotelniki village of Moscow County, where he served for 21 years. In November 1910 he was appointed a psalmist to the Church of St. Mary of Blacherny in the village of Blachernskaya Kuzminki of the same county. On the 18th of March in 1912 he was ordained a deacon to the same church. In 1920, for excellent service for the sake of the Church of God, Deacon Dmitry was awarded by the Patriarch with a blessed charter, while in 1924 was ordained with a double stole. In March 1924, Deacon Dmitry Smirnov was transferred to the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Aksinina in Zvenigorod district. On the 21st of September in 1928, Father Dmitry was ordained a priest to the Trinity Church in the village of Yershova on Zvenigorod district of Moscow region. In 1932, Father Dmitry was transferred to the Trinity Church of Troitska village of the same district. In 1937, he was awarded with a pectoral cross. Like all priests, Father Dmitry was severely taxed by the Soviet authorities that he could hardly pay. In 1937, after failing to pay the taxes, he was fined, and as he could not pay the fine, in the February of 1938, his property was distrained. In the summer of 1937, the persecutions became much more severe, and both clergy and laics were arrested. Without any guilt, people were sentenced to execution or imprisonment in a labor camp. In October, atheists arrested and a month later executed the brother of priest Dmitry, Archpriest Vsevolod Smirnov, who served at the Domitian Church in the village of Dermentsovo of Volokolamsk district of Moscow region. In December 1937, the wife of Father Dmitry died. On the 15th of March in 1938, the investigators of the NKVD of Zvenigorod district questioned several witnesses who gave needed testifies against Father Dmitry. The chairman of the collective farm of Troitskoye village said, "As a religious servant, Smirnov degrades the collective farm. For example, during the spring sitting as well as during harvest and sitting on religious holidays, he gathers male and female collective farmers at the church, where he agitates people to love and respect God. On religious holidays, people do not go to work, going to church instead, and disrupting collective work and corrupting other people's labor moral in this way." On the 22nd of March, priest Dmitry Smirnov was arrested and kept in preliminary detention cell in Zvenigorod, later being transferred to Sretenskaya prison in Moscow. On the 5th of May in 1938, the investigation was over, and on the 9th of August in 1938, special meeting of NKVD sentenced Father Dmitry to 5 years of exile in Kazakhstan. Priest Dmitry Smirnov died on the 13th of September in 1938, probably still being in Moscow, and was buried in the unknown grave.
We are at the Church of Christ the Savior in Slavskaya village, where monastic martyr Vladimir Volkov served.
Monastic martyr Vladimir Georgy Nilovich Volkov was born on the 21st of April 1878 in the village of Malyi Palatki of Smolensk province in the family of a peasant. Up to the age of 21, Georgy was bred and educated by his family at home, helping his father with his household. In 1899, Georgy was called to the army and served there until February 1905. As a literate man, he served as a senior clerk of the army commander of the town of Grad. Before his military leave, he passed an exam on the rank of a military clerk during wartime. At that time, he came to the decision of retirement to a monastery, and in 1906 he became an obedient at the hermitage of St. Proclesus, near the Trinity Sergius Lavra. On the 15th of July 1909, Georgy Nilovich took monastic vows and was named Vladimir. At the hermitage, his obedience included being a baker, a church clerk, and a record clerk. In 1912, monk Vladimir was transferred to the Trinity Sergius Lavra and was appointed a caretaker of the printing house. On the 19th of March 1915, he was ordained a monk deacon. After the Trinity Sergius Lavra was closed, monk deacon Vladimir was sent to serve at the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Klushina in Smolensk province. In 1921, the Soviets closed the church, and in April, monk deacon was sent to serve at the Church of St. Demetrius of Thessaloniki in the village of Shimonovo of Mazhaysky district of Moscow region. In 1930, monk deacon Vladimir was ordained a hieromonk, and after petition of the parishioners, he was sent to serve the Church of Christ the Savior in the village of Oslavskaya of Zvenigrad district in Moscow region. In 1931, he was ordained a hagiography and awarded with a priest club, while in 1932 he was ordained an archimandrite. Since 1931, serving at the church, Father Vladimir was an accountant at the editorial office of the magazine of the Moscow Patriarchate. In 1935, after the editorial office of the magazine was closed, Archimandrite Vladimir worked for a year as a sales assistant at the Patriarchate, being responsible for the sales of church objects. On the 21st of February in 1938, Archbishop Sergius Voskresensky, the vicar of the Moscow diocese, offered Archimandrite Vladimir to be a ghostly father for him and Metropolitan Sergius Starogrodsky, but this could no longer happen, as on the 27th of February 1938, Father Vladimir was arrested and imprisoned in the Mozhaisk prison. On the 7th of March in 1938, the NKVD Troika sentenced him to firing squad for anti-Soviet agitation, and he was transferred to the Taganskaya prison in Moscow. Archimandrite Vladimir Volkov was executed on the 25th of March in 1938 and was entombed in the unknown Popo's grave on the Butovo firing range area near Moscow. On the 26th of December 2001, Archimandrite Vladimir Volkov was canonized by the decree of the Holy Synod as new Martyr and Confessor of Russia.
We are at Znamenskaya church in Znamenskaya village, where Holy Martyr Vasily Smirnov served.
Holy Martyr Vasily was born on the 29th of March in 1870 in the village of Kazanskaya of the Bogorodsk county of Moscow province, in the family of priest Pavel Smirnov. Later his father became a prior of the Church of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross in the village of Altufyevo, now it is in Moscow. After graduating from ecclesiastical seminary, Vasily Pavlovich was a teacher at Spasskaya Parish School of Duke Orlov-Davidov in Bronitsa County, being a member of the community of teachers of secondary schools of Moscow. In 1892, as he wrote in the questionnaire, he dedicated himself to service activities, becoming a psalmist at the Church of St. Nicholas of Zaetsky. Since 1901, Vasily Pavlovich taught the law of God in several parish schools, in most cases teaching for free. In 1907, Vasily Pavlovich married and was ordained a deacon, while in 1914 he became a priest at the Church of St. Nicholas of Zaetsky. After 1921, Father Vasily graduated from Moscow Ecclesiastical Seminary. In 1929, Father Vasily became a prior at the Church of St. Nicholas of Zaitsky. According to the reminiscences of his neighbor, Alexandra Nikolaevna Sokolova, the priest wore black clothes with a cross up to his last day. He was said to do all his best to prevent the closure of the church. After the closure of the Church of St. Nicholas of Zaitsky, in 1933, Father Vasily served in Moscow at the Church of St. Grigory of Neocaesarea, also until its closure. The last place he served at from 1933 up to his arrest in 1938 was the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of the Sign in the village of Znamenskoye in Kuntsovo district of Moscow region, also taking pastoral care about parishioners in Kuntsovo at home. At that time, Archpriest Vasily Smirnov was awarded with a mitre. On the 22nd of March in 1938, Father Vasily was arrested and imprisoned in Lefortovo prison, being accused in anti-Soviet and religious agitation, as well as performing rites at home. During the interrogations and confrontation, he refused to plead guilty. On the 7th of June in 1938, the Troika of NKVD of Moscow region sentenced Father Vasily to firing squad, charging him for anti-Soviet agitation. Archpriest Vasily was executed on the 1st of July in 1938 and was entombed in the unknown Pope's grave on the Butovo firing range near Moscow. On the 23rd of August in 1989, Father Vasily was rehabilitated by the prosecutor's office of Moscow. According to the statement of the great-grandson of the Saint Archpriest Dmitry Smirnov, the biography of Archpriest Vasily was examined for canonization. On the 13th and 16th of August in 2000, he was canonized by the Bishops' Council as new Martyr and Confessor of Russia. We're next to the Church of Christ the Savior in the village of Usovo of Odintsovo district, where Holy Martyr Sergius Mahaev is highly venerated. Holy Martyr Sergius was born on the 6th of September in 1874 in the family of the priest Konstantin Mahaev, who served at the Church of Christ the Savior in the Usovo village of Moscow County, where there was an estate of the Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich. Sergei got spiritual education in Bethany Theological Seminary, which he graduated with the first class in June of 1895. After 2 years of teaching, he became a psalmist at Moscow Church of St. Nicholas the Wonder Worker in Kosheli. From the early beginning of his church activity, Sergei Konstantinovich showed himself as a teacher and zealous preacher of the Word of God. Being a psalmist, he also worked as a teacher at parish schools, often working for free. In these years he married Ludmila Sergeyevna Tsvetkova, the daughter of a Moscow priest Sergius Tsvetkov. The couple did not have any children. In 1900, at the Moscow Iberian Community of Sisters of Mercy of the Red Cross, there was built a church in honor of the Iberian icon of the Mother of God, where on the 29th of July, Sergius Mahaev was appointed as a psalmist. On the 15th of October, Partheny Levitsky, the Archbishop of Mozhaisk, ordained him a deacon, and then on the 17th of October a priest. At this church Father Sergius served for 19 years. Becoming a priest, Father Sergius continued teaching career, but as a catechist. He also became a member of Moscow Committee of the Imperial Orthodox Palestine Society. Since the autumn of 1905, at the request of Grand Duchess Elizabeth Feodorovna, Father Sergius began to teach future sisters of the Iberian community the law of God, trying to develop them spiritually and preparing them for the upcoming serving to the needs of the needy, teaching to bring strength from the grace of God and praying to the saints. Alongside the sisters, he went pilgrimage with them, talking about spiritual life, edifying them on the examples of the native devotees. Father Sergius published some books where he tried to show how the commandment of Christ of love towards God and towards the closest could be fulfilled even doing simple and attractive everyday duties. The priest had a distinguished feature of special spiritual mood, which was revealed in his attitude towards the nearest people and the events that happened. On the 6th of May in 1915, after a recommendation from the Imperial Orthodox Palestinian community for 15-year-long free work and zealous efforts, Father Sergius was awarded with a coif. On the 29th of June in 1917, he was awarded with a Golden Pectoral Cross. After the revolution, Father Sergius continued to serve at the Church of the Iberian Icon of the Mother of God. Since the community was deprived of funds, which ensured its existence before, the priest, like many others at this time, worked in the civil service, the legal department of the Moskovetsky Soviet Department. As a civil worker, Father Sergius protected the rights of churches and saved them from total demolishment in the years of persecution. On the 24th of June in 1919, Father Sergius was appointed a prior of the Church of the Holy Apostles Peter and Paul on Bolshaya Yakimanka. He also didn't stop teaching of the law of God. On the 26th of March in 1920, Father Sergius was ordained an archpriest by Metropolitan of Krutitsky Yevsevy. In February 1922, Moscow Diocesan Committee allowed Father Sergius for his outstanding Masonic work to accept and to wear a golden pectoral cross with precious stones given by his parishioners. The same year he was arrested on suspicion of teaching the law of God to children, but was released 2 weeks later. In 1924, once again Father Sergius was arrested on charges of anti-Soviet agitation and spent 3 months behind bars. In 1925 he served as a second priest at the Church of St. Maron the Wonder Worker in Old Panich until its closure in 1930. The next place where Father Sergius served at might be the Trinity Church in Ostankina, where the service continued until 1934. In the early 1930s, his wife Ludmila died. In 1937, Father Sergius was appointed as a prior of the Cathedral of the Epiphany of Noginsk. In August 1937, all members of the Church Council of the Epiphany Cathedral were arrested. Father Sergius did all his best to prevent the closure of the church, but on the 22nd of November 1937, Father Sergius was arrested on charges of counter-revolutionary propaganda and imprisoned in the town of Noginsk. On the 25th of November, the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Sergius to death. Archpriest Sergius Mahayev was executed on the 2nd of December 1937 and was buried in the unmarked mass grave at the Butov Iron Range near Moscow. Several days before that, on the 25th of November 1937, Father Sergius' brother, psalmist Alexander Mahayev, was executed here. In August of 2000, Archpriest Sergius Mahayev was canonized by the decree of the Holy Synod as new martyr and confessor of Russia.
Modern generation of Orthodox Christians in general didn't live during the time of persecutions, and while reading hagiographies of new Martyrs and Confessors of Russia, many people often ask a question: where is the confession of Christ during the sufferings and investigations?
The first and the most important confession is that despite the perennial persecutions, they not only remained faithful to the Church. Many of them, exactly during the repressions, chose the way of apostolic service, and it was their own choice. Depriving of civil rights, backbreaking requisitions, arrests, exiles, and labor camps, taking of property, all these forms of oppression were had almost by all new martyrs and confessors, and these circumstances didn't make them deny the Orthodox Church.
Mankind has lived many centuries, and we no longer have bonfires and wild beasts on the arenas of the colosseums, but the fear of imprisonment and tortures connected with it, death, anxiety, and the fear of the fate of relatives and personal fate all remain the same.
And in this case, sufferings of the man unfairly convicted, only meek and humble heart would get the crown of martyrdom, the highest award of the disciple of Christ. But now can we die for this world that the mundane is no longer attractive?
The study of the feet of new martyrs and confessors of Russia is not just in canonization of as many saints as it is possible, but it is in spiritual movement towards these devotees, who could have served as lighthouses on the way to the kingdom of God. For showing the way to the eternity of Christ, even a small number of lighthouses is enough, while the more their number is, the brighter the way will be, but they must not remain uncalled. Now the canonization of martyrs is the business neither of the Commission of the Canonization of Saints, nor of specific ministers, as they all have done the majority of their job, while the Russian Orthodox Church has already praised new martyrs and confessors, both known and unknown to the world, but known to God. Now it is high time for people to put this gift of Christ and the gift of the saints into practice. For 2000 years of the history of the Church of Christ, the barn of God has been filled with the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus and because of the Word of God. The holy history has not ended so far, and new witnesses, new martyrs and confessors of the Russian Church have been teaching us, like Saint Apostles and the first Christians, to pray and praise God in this way. Now, Lord, consider their threats and enable your servants to speak your word with great boldness. Stretch out your hand to heal and perform signs and wonders through the name of your holy servant, Jesus. is not much left in the memory of the new generations. The lines from the hagiographies are usually very short and almost unemotional. We meet the same words as someone lived, served, and died. But these plain words don't reveal the full extent, the great fates and hard, uneasy lives of people with uncrushable spirit and willpower, the people whose way, despite all life circumstances and eternal struggles, was to follow Christ, who is the way, the truth, and the life. The existence of saints of all times is a vivid and convincing preaching about Orthodox Christianity, as well as the lives of the Orthodox Christians of the first centuries. The lives of our contemporary Russian confessors and martyrs preach the gospel, and they remind us of the main fact that our God is the same yesterday, today, and forever.